people think that goes away in April with the heat.
Hello, welcome back to Planet America. I'm John Barrett.
I'm Chaz Ciadello.
This week the polls say Donald Trump is heading for a massive defeat, but will he go?
The American economy is heading off a COVID cliff unless Congress does something, and Congress is not that good at doing something.
And celebrity candidates like Kanye West are nothing new. We'll look at those who made it and those who did not.
There is a lot to catch up on, so let's get started.
President Trump gave a coronavirus briefing for the first time since April earlier today, and while he was still blaming China, still claiming to have saved millions of lives and still predicting the virus would go away, he also made a bit of a concession.
Some areas of our country are doing very well, others are doing less well. It will probably, unfortunately, get worse before it gets better. Something I don't like saying about things, but that's the way it is. It's what we have. You look over the world.
After months of refusing to wear a face mask in public yesterday, President Trump tweeted this picture of himself saying,
"We are united in our effort to defeat the invisible China virus, and many people say that it is patriotic to wear a face mask when you can't socially distance. There is nobody more patriotic than me, your favorite president."
That came after US Surgeon General Jerome Adams went on one of the president's favourite Fox News shows to ask their viewers directly to put on a mask.
I'm pleading with your viewers. I'm begging you, please understand that we are not trying to take away your freedoms when we say wear a face covering. We're not trying to take away your ability to go out when we say keep restaurant capacity under 50%. We're saying if we do these things, we can actually open and stay open.
Could be the President Trump was watching at the time. That represented quite an about-face from Adams as well. He sent out tweets like this earlier in the pandemic.
They are not effective in preventing general public from catching #coronavirus. But if healthcare providers can't get them to care for sick patients, it puts them and our communities at risk.
Presumptive Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden, who's been mocked by President Trump for wearing a face mask, says Donald Trump has given up in the fight against COVID-19.
He surrendered. He talked about, you remember early on, this is going to go away in a few days. This is going to be gone tomorrow. You're going to wake up and be gone. He talked about how we were going to be in a position where we were going to be able to lead the world, etc. And he was going to be a wartime president fighting this virus. Well, he raised the white flag.
So, Chaz, where is America really up to in the fight against coronavirus?
Well, the key number is always deaths, and America has had about 140,000 of them, with daily deaths rising from about 500 a day to a little over 800 a day. But that's still much fewer than there were in April. The new daily cases have shot up to about 70,000 cases a day. That's 5 times Australia's entire pandemic per day. But Trump rightly points out that case numbers are related to testing.
If we tested half as much, those numbers would be down.
Indeed, if we look at testing numbers, they are increasing now to almost 800,000 a day. But daily case numbers tripled in the 33 days that testing increased by 50%. So this spike is not just the result of more testing. And if you need more proof of that, these are the total national hospitalisations for COVID, which are now pretty much where they were at their peak back in April. You can't fake hospital beds, although Trump does think that things are better than they seem.
But when you talk about mortality rates, I think it's the opposite. I think we have one of the lowest mortality rates in the world.
We're going to take a look. We had 900 deaths on a single day.
We will take a look.
This week.
Ready?
You can check it out.
Could you please get me the mortality rate?
Yeah.
Kaylee's right here. I heard we had one of the lowest, maybe the lowest mortality rate anywhere in the world. You have the numbers, please? Number one low mortality rate. I hope you show the scenario because it shows what fake news is all about. Okay, go
I don't
ahead.
think I'm fake news, but
Okay.
we'll put
there you were.
we'll put our stats on.
You said we had the worst mortality rate in the world, and we have the best.
All right, it's a little complicated, but bear with us. We went with numbers from Johns Hopkins University,
Stop. I need to explain this. You see that paper that Trump was waving around before? Yeah, that one there, that's it. It doesn't say mortality rate. It says case fatality rate, and that is a different figure. The case fatality ratio is also, by the way, what Chris Wallace fact-checked Trump on, but that figure is pointless. The case fatality ratio doesn't measure the percentage of your country that has died. It only measures the percentage of your known cases that have died. Let me illustrate why that's useless. Amongst countries with more than 10,000 cases, America is the 29th worst case fatality ratio. That's out of 76 countries, by the way, so it's not exactly number one like Trump said. But even though France has basically the same death rate as America, since France tests less than America does, they have fewer known cases, and so they have a much higher case fatality ratio. Similarly, Germany has like a quarter as many deaths per capita as America does, but somehow they end up with a higher case fatality ratio. And what's the country with the lowest case fatality ratio? The leader of the pack we should all emulate? The Ivory Coast. So make of that what you will. In the meantime, these are the real mortality stats. For countries with more than 1 million people, America has the 8th highest death rate, about to pass France, although Peru and Brazil will probably be passing America soon as well. And this is a problem for Trump, because for the first time, a majority of people have either been or know someone who has been infected by COVID. Hence, coronavirus easily has become the most important election issue. This was from the latest Fox poll. In that same poll, 51% of people trusted Biden to do a better job handling corona, compared to only 34% trusting Trump. And that's an 8-point turnaround since May. The good news for Trump is that vaccines are hopefully approaching. A potential American vaccine has shown an ability to produce antibodies like COVID survivors have, and next week it begins its final big trial. We should know if it works by the end of the year. And the final trial has already begun for a vaccine developed by Oxford Uni. If everything goes well with this one, it could be out by September, with 2 billion doses in the process of being produced right now. Trump's best chance might be riding on those trials, John. By the way, I'm going to be going through all the states on Friday, especially Florida, which has seen over 10,000 new cases a day at the moment. It's even more than was being measured in New York back in April. But it's very weird that right in the middle of that outbreak there, Disney chose to reopen its Florida theme park. I'm not sure anyone knows what's going on there, but to be fair, Disney really has embraced the coronavirus.
Introducing the Coronavirus Classic Disney Cinema Collection, with titles such as SARS, No More Than 100 Dalmatians, The Princess Diarrhea, the sequel to Fantasia 2000, Blame Asia 2000 Times, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. We didn't even need to change the name of this one. And Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. We didn't have to change this one either. Now with valuable coronavirus lessons like staying home when you have symptoms.
Pinocchio, why didn't you go to school?
Go ahead, tell her.
I have a nose inflammation.
Wearing masks when you're sick.
Quack, quack, quack,
The consequences of not taking COVID seriously.
Ooh, just to be sure, you didn't sleep with Sneezy, did you?
Whoops, sorry. Rest in peace.
And how the virus might have started off.
I'm going to cook you for dinner. Oh dear, I'm a goner! Ah!
The Coronavirus Classic Disney Cinema Collection. Because no one said the circle of life was going to be long.
Faced with more dire poll numbers this week, President Trump sacked his campaign manager Brad Parscale, replacing him with Bill Stepien, a longtime advisor to former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Parscale was blamed for that embarrassing turnout at last month's Trump campaign rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He boasted of 1 million supporters expressing interest in going. Just over 6,000 showed up, less than 1/3 the capacity of the BOK Arena. Fox News, meanwhile, had some more bad polling news for the president. Chris Wallace seemed to rather enjoy delivering it too.
The national horse race, Joe Biden leads you by 8 points, 49% to 41. That's, I think, 3-4 points slimmer than it was a month ago. I understand we still have more than 100 days to this election, but at this point, you're losing.
First of all, I'm not losing, because those are fake polls. They were fake in 2016, and now they're even more fake.
As well as saying the polls are fake, President Trump has been trying to portray Joe Biden as senile for months. And Chris Wallace asked him about that.
Is Joe Biden senile?
I don't want to say that. I say he's not competent to be president. To be president, you have to be sharp and tough and so many other things.
And what does this sharp, tough president think will happen if Joe Biden does win?
Religion will be gone, okay? Life, you could forget about that, the whole question of life.
Well, get ready for the possible end of religion and life. The battleground state averages have Biden leading comfortably in Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida, Pennsylvania and Michigan, as well as Arizona, by an average of 5 percentage points. And the Electoral College is looking very good for the Democratic nominee as well there. Joe Biden has even been running ads in states like Texas, which haven't voted for a Democrat in decades, but which are suddenly looking competitive.
If you're sick, if you're struggling, if you're worried about how you're going to get through the day, I will not abandon you. We're all in this together. We'll fight this together. And together, we'll emerge from this stronger than we were before we began. I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
His message seems to be working. The average national polls have President Trump trailing Biden by over 8.5 points. And there are 104 days to go until the 2020 election, Chad.
Now, those are averages you just showed us, John, but there are plenty of head-to-head polls where Biden is over 50% now. And remember, no challenger in polling history has ever polled above 50% at this point and gone on to lose. It's never happened before. Another big deal. Remember the trait we always talk about, cares about people like me? Well, only 37% say that Trump cares about average Americans in the latest Quinnipiac poll, compared to 59% who say Joe Biden does. That is huge. Also huge is that polls like Fox are now registering Biden as slightly more trusted on his handling of the economy. That's Trump's strength. And even on Trump's preferred issue at the moment, law and order, Biden has been recently leading him by a 7-point margin. Finally, we shouldn't underestimate the effect of demographic change either. Dave Wasserman noted that if non-college whites, college whites and non-whites all turn out and vote in exactly the same proportions in 2020 as they did back in 2016, just because of demographic change alone, Biden would win Florida, Michigan, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and the election. So Trump's trying to make history while going uphill.
It's a steep one too. Let's find out how much trouble Donald Trump is really in. Back with us, Professor Larry Sabato from the University of Virginia's Center for Politics. Welcome back to Planet America, Larry.
Thank you so much. Nice to be back with you.
So the polls are looking pretty bad for President Trump right now, but then of course 4 years ago the polls were looking pretty bad for then candidate Donald Trump. We all saw what happened. What do you make of the state of the race now?
You're certainly correct that Donald Trump wasn't doing well 4 years ago either, though he wasn't doing this poorly. The polls actually 4 years ago kept fluctuating. And occasionally Trump would be tied with Clinton, even in polls that we later learned were not properly balanced and weighted. He hasn't had that luxury. In fact, he's been falling further and further behind. Now, I don't believe several of the recent polls that have Biden winning by 15%. That's absurd. We live in a very polarized country, and you're not going to see a landslide for a long, long time. So this is a summer exaggeration or maybe just a summer mirage, but I don't think even in the Trump camp privately there'd be anybody who said Trump is ahead or that Trump was even tied. Trump is the underdog right now. He was the underdog 4 years ago, but he wasn't the incumbent. He was running against the incumbent party. This time he has a record to defend in the middle of a pandemic, an economic collapse, and racial protests all across the country.
How significant is it that Biden has had this big lead for 6 weeks? Does that mean the lead is stickier, or does it not really matter?
Well, you'd much rather be ahead than behind, but it certainly doesn't predict what's going to happen a little more than 100 days from now. And remember, Trump's era is dog days. Every hour of the Trump presidency is worth a day of a normal president. So there are a million things that could happen, and there are 1,000 things that will happen that could change those results. But I'd have to say you would much rather right now to be Joe Biden. Whether that continues once the focus is put on Biden, we'll see. He's invisible for the most part. You get a little tiny clip of him on a daily basis or every other day giving a speech near his home or in his basement. This has been an ideal campaign for him because he's not the focus of the campaign. Donald Trump is, and Donald Trump from the very beginning has been extremely controversial. And if anything, he's more controversial today than he ever has been.
So, Larry, would you say, therefore, that Joe Biden is actually just winning this campaign by default, or is his campaign getting something right?
It's actually both. He's winning by default because Donald Trump is more or less, at least to this point, throwing the election in his lap. But they're also on the Biden team doing the right thing, which is not trying to run an aggressive campaign. Why would you, to use the old phrase, interfere with your opponent when he's in the middle of committing suicide? You simply step back and let him do it.
Larry, we keep assuming that Biden can't stay invisible forever, but is that necessarily true?
If we have another few months like the last 6 months, he could easily remain invisible. We have such a torrent of news at such a high velocity. It is impossible for people to keep up, even people like me who get up early and start with the news and whose job revolves around the news. So I would say at this point, Biden would hope for the next few months to be like the last 6. I doubt it will be completely, but the pandemic, if anything, is heating up. The economy, if anything, is weakening. And the racial protests don't seem to be going away either.
Final question for you, Larry. What happens come November if Donald Trump loses, but he does not accept the fact that he's lost?
Believe it or not, this is a serious worry over here. Now, maybe it will all dissolve after Election Day. If Trump should lose by a wide margin, we're not going to have a problem because there'll be nobody with him, including the Republicans who voted for every single one of his proposals. But if this turns out to be a close election, if you have even the popular vote close, but certainly the Electoral College close, Katie barred the door. I don't know how we're going to get through this because if Trump can possibly hold on to the presidency, he will do it. Maybe the military's involved, although to the extent that I know, the military is not inclined to help a president stay in office. That would be the end of American democracy. But there are ways to do it. And if Trump sees any possibility of staying in, he will take that possibility.
Larry Sabato, many thanks indeed for being with us.
Thank you very much.
One of the biggest stories over the past couple of weeks was the announcement by rapper Kanye West that he was running for the presidency, dropping his support for President Trump, registering to vote for the first time, encouraging others to do the same.
I just wanted to show everybody how easy it is to vote here. New voter application. My name, my date of birth, my official Wyoming driver's license, my local driver's license.
And the media lapped it up.
He's been talking about running for president for a while. He's a little late to the game. He's got to get some kind of program together, but I think really these are very serious times.
But how serious was Kanye's candidacy?
Kanye West is ending his 2020 campaign for president of the United States just 11 days after announcing his run on Twitter.
11 days? That's even shorter than Mike Bloomberg's campaign. Still, the dream of President Yeezy may not be entirely over. He's actually qualified to be on the presidential ballot in the state of Oklahoma, filing the paperwork, paying $35,000 to register. And he had a weird appearance earlier this week that had a few people concerned that he may be unwell, but to some politicos, it's actually just a sneaker-driven publicity stunt.
I think he got exactly what he wanted. We've just spent 3 minutes talking about it.
You could be right, George, but don't forget this.
We better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket.
Next, I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on.
Sorry to laugh.
The fact is, celebrity candidates didn't start with Kanye or Donald Trump. One of the Republican Party's greatest heroes, Ronald Reagan, was a Hollywood actor before he was president.
A lot of people think they're born better than others. I'm trying to prove it's the way you're raised that counts.
By the time Reagan was elected president in 1980, he'd been governor of America's largest state, California, for 8 years. But even that still made him a subject of some mirth.
I kid you, sir. You are a politician. Black, white,
Jew, Gentile, we're all working for one cause, to figure out how you became governor.
And other actors have tried getting into politics as well.
But has it been a real disadvantage?
I think it's been a great advantage. I think I've been most fortunate by having the opportunities presented to me because of little Shirley.
Shirley Temple ran for Congress. She lost, but later became a US ambassador.
We have a terrific ship's library.
Great. Do you have any books on Lennon?
No, but I think we've got one on Ringo.
Fred Grandy, who played Gopher on The Love Boat, served 4 terms as a Republican member of Congress and ran unsuccessfully for governor of Iowa. Jesse the Body Ventura used his pro wrestling fame to become an independent mayor, then governor of Minnesota.
We've shocked the world. Minnesota leads the way.
And then, of course, there was Arnie.
Governor-elect Arnold Schwarzenegger.
50% believe that he has a favorable approval rating. A defeat completely for Gray Davis, but certainly Mr. Schwarzenegger is, as of now, the projected winner.
Back in the 80s, actor Clint Eastwood was elected mayor of Carmel, California. Singer Sonny Bono was mayor of Palm Springs, then a Republican member of Congress. Fred Thompson's career alternated between politics, the law and acting. He ran for president in 2008. And don't forget Roseanne.
Here I go, running for president.
The point is, plenty of celebrities have run for political office in America with varying levels of success. It's nothing new, and it's not just a product of Hollywood, television and pop culture. Celebrity candidates really began with America's first president, George Washington, a former general and hero of the Revolutionary War. Other famous military leaders went all the way to the White House as well with little or no political experience, like Ulysses S. Grant and Dwight D. Eisenhower. Others have done it with thin CVs as well. There was just something about them, a star quality. Barack Obama was as much a celebrity candidate as a politician.
We've been warned against offering the people of this nation false hope. But in the unlikely story that is America, there's never been anything false about home.
All of which helps explain Donald Trump.
I am your voice.
A persona based on success in business, decades on TV and a clear political message, but while he was elected on a promise, he now has a record, and that reality is proving to be a harder sell.
Negotiations are underway for the next stage of coronavirus relief, and it seems like everyone has brought their own poison pill along. Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell's opening negotiations by insisting on a shield from lawsuits for businesses that might open too early and have sick employees, as long as they make a reasonable effort to comply with health guidelines, whatever that means. Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer wants to remove a cap on a property tax deduction for rich city dwellers, and Trump is insisting on a payroll tax cut to help the few people who do have jobs. Not even Republicans are into that idea. Oh, and he apparently wants to block funding for testing and contact tracing in the middle of a pandemic. Go figure. But they better get their act together, because if they don't, an almighty economic crunch is coming. To the wall!
Big, beautiful wall.
Okay, let's start with the support the government offered for businesses. They had a program there called the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP. That was a loan to keep small businesses going that became a donation if the businesses kept their workers employed. Wonderful! Except the program expires in a little over 2 weeks. And even with that program, Harvard researchers estimated nearly 110,000 small businesses shut down by early May. According to Yelp, that rate of businesses shutting down has increased further, by the way, over the last few weeks. And that is all while the program is going. After August 9, things are going to get worse. A Goldman Sachs survey found 84% of loan recipients will run out of money by the first week of August. And only 16% say they're confident they'll be able to maintain payroll without more help from the government. Another survey found 22% of PPP loan recipients expect they're going to have to sack at least one person when their loan is up. And that all starts in 2 weeks. Then there is the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance. These are the unemployment benefits that go to pretty much everyone who stops working during the pandemic, complete with $600 extra a week. And those benefits expire at the end of next week. As of 2 weeks ago, there were over 32 million claims receiving some kind of unemployment assistance. But almost 16 million of those claims have benefits expiring next week. And the other 16 million, well, they're regular unemployment benefits, and they only last for 13 weeks in most states. And hey, the pandemic's been going for longer than 13 weeks. So we're about to see a lot of people with no money. Now, to be fair, there is plenty of double counting of claims going on amongst these categories, but even if we only count the officially unemployed, and there are plenty of people receiving benefits who are not officially unemployed, there are still over 19 million officially unemployed people who are going to be cut off very soon. But there are only about 5 million job openings. So these people here are not going to find a job, even ignoring the fact that many of them live in COVID hotspots, so they probably shouldn't be trying to find a job anyway. And remember, the pre-pandemic record for Americans on unemployment benefits was 6.5 million back in the 2009 recession. It's now 3 times that. So America has a problem. And it's not just a cash problem, because in America, many people get their health insurance through their jobs as well. According to one study, 5.4 million people became uninsured in the middle of a pandemic because they lost their jobs. And that was just up to May. So it's undoubtedly worse now. And by the way, all 10 of the states with the highest percentage of uninsured people are all COVID hotspots. These were their daily cases on Saturday. Geez, 30% of Texas was uninsured. Anyway, to be clear here, the extended unemployment benefits are extremely generous, and some people are doing very well out of them. Personal savings have actually doubled during the pandemic, but lots of people fall through the cracks as well. Food insecurity has almost doubled since 2018, from there to there, with almost 30% of households with children saying that the food didn't last and they couldn't afford to get more. Another survey found 39% of black households with children were food insecure. 37% of Latino households with children were, and 22% of white households with children were food insecure. So you can imagine how much worse this situation could get if the unemployment benefits expire. Finally, there are the eviction protections for those who can't afford rent. Those expire on Friday, and they only cover 12 million of the 43 million rental units anyway. The rest are covered by state law, and many of those protections have already expired. And that is why the Aspen Institute projects 19 to 23 million renter households are at risk of eviction by September 30. And look, it might already be too late to avoid all this economic damage, by the way, because a professor told Vox that if state unemployment insurance agencies don't know whether they're continuing their payments till the last second, they may not actually be able to get those payments out to people until September. And that would obviously be an issue. For example, do you remember those $1,200 stimulus checks that the government was handing out back in March? Well, as of June, 30 to 35 million of those payments still hadn't gone out over 2 months after the bill was passed. Now, don't get me wrong, I know that the government isn't made of money. For the first 9 months of the fiscal year, the deficit was $2.74 trillion, when the previous annual record was $1.4 trillion set during the last recession. In fact, the deficit just last month alone was $864 billion, and that was more than the deficit in the whole of 2017 and 2018. But the cost of doing nothing is pretty extreme as well. According to economist Jason Furman, not extending unemployment assistance alone could reduce GDP by 2% next quarter, and even more in the quarter after that. So lawmakers have a decision to make, and they're running out of time to make it.
Big, beautiful world.
March 7th, 1965. 25-year-old John Lewis, that's him in the light coat wearing a backpack, is leading a peaceful march of 600, mostly black men and women from Selma, Alabama to the capital Montgomery to demand greater voting rights for African Americans. State troopers warn them to stop.
Be detrimental to your safety to continue this march, and I'm saying that this is an unlawful assembly. You are to disperse. You are ordered to disperse. Go home or go to your church.
Despite his relatively young age, Lewis is already recognised as a civil rights leader. He was an architect and keynote speaker at the historic 1963 March on Washington.
We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now.
2 years later, Lewis leads the marchers in Selma onto the Edmund Pettus Bridge, crossing a county line. Mounted troopers attack with nightsticks and tear gas. Lewis is clubbed in the head. Dozens more are badly wounded on what comes to be called Bloody Sunday.
Can we have somebody take somebody to a doctor?
In the following weeks, there are more marches when Alabama's segregationist Democratic Governor George Wallace refuses to protect the legal protests. Federal forces are deployed by President Lyndon Johnson, and the violence is seen on TV screens across America. A week later, President Johnson unveils a Voting Rights Act.
Because all Americans just must have the right to vote. And we are going to give them that right.
That August, Lyndon Johnson signed it into law. John Lewis would go on to become an influential Democratic congressman. 10 years ago, he was awarded the Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honour, by the first black president, Barack Obama.
From his activism in the civil rights movement to his nearly 25 years in the House of Representatives, John R. Lewis has dedicated his life to shattering barriers and fighting injustice.
This past March, despite suffering pancreatic cancer, Lewis marked the 55th anniversary of Bloody Sunday by again crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge.
We were beaten, we were tear gassed. I thought I was going to die on this bridge. But somehow, in some way, God Almighty helped me here.
John Lewis died this week at the age of 80. There's now a push to rename the Edmund Pettus Bridge the John Lewis Bridge. Pettus was a former Confederate general and leader of the Ku Klux Klan. John Lewis was known as the conscience of Congress, and there was a remarkable moment this week when news of his death was announced.
Clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 1054, resolved that the House has heard with profound sorrow of the death of the Honorable John Lewis, a representative from the state of Georgia, that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn as a further mark of respect to the memory of the deceased.
And with that, Chaz, we are right out of time.
See you for a fireside chat on ABC News on Friday night.
Good night.